the Gender Summit 19 team, colleagues in Asia and around the world, greetings. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel today. I'm Dorothy Nyambi. I'm the President and CEO at the Mennonite Economic Development Associate based in Canada, MEDA. MEDA is an international economic development organization that creates business solutions to poverty. We've been doing so for the past 60 plus years, and we're really proud to say we've been doing so in a sustainable, scalable, measurable, and replicable manner. I come to this panel today wearing two hats. It's a dual hat. First, as an African woman in science myself, who has worked on the front lines of care in some of the most challenging circumstances. From what I consider as downstream medicine, where you wait for people to fall sick, they come, you try to fix them and send them back up, to what I refer today as upstream medicine. What can we do to prevent people from falling sick, manage themselves so that they not only are not falling sick as often, but when they do fall sick, they can afford for the health care that they deserve, to take care of themselves and get back to full well-being. Again, I'm honored to be called upon to share my experience and point of view on this platform. My journey is an example of a trajectory I have taken, which is a combination of challenges, roadblocks, opportunities, enablers, and mentors who are part of my story and still are today. So that's the first part of why I'm here as a woman in science from Africa myself. Secondly, I'm on this platform today because I believe I'm a social entrepreneur and I bring this from at a personal level. And social entrepreneurship comes to me from a very deep place, starting with my grandmother, moving on to my mother, my aunts. So some very strong women in my life whom I have seen take the opportunities they have to build and garner resources so they can do greater good for others. As we got into this panel, and before I actually get to answering the question that has been posed, I just want to talk about timing. 2020 is actually Beijing plus 25. 25 years after 30,000. It was a big group that gathered in Beijing in 1995. And today, 25 years later, we're trying to take stock of what progress we've made before we can even talk about what the world would look like 5 to 10 years from now. My talk is just going to be based on the nexus of women, science, and a bit of sciencepreneur. So what I mean by sciencepreneur is how do you become an entrepreneur using your science as a little bit of that pivot or of that tool. The question we're answering today on this panel, to look out and think 5, 10 years from now. If you'd asked me this same question on December 30th, 2019, my response might have been slightly different from what it is today. And I use the word slightly in a very measured manner. Once COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization in March this year, and the world went into lockdown, it rapidly became evident how interconnected the multiple ecosystems that make up our existence were all affected. I have had the opportunity to not just pause, as many of you have, but it has been a pause that has come with a lot of reflection. What is different for me now and moving forward versus what was it going to be had there been no COVID-19? And that is where I pejoratively said the word slight. The world is working on a timed agenda towards Agenda 2030. Will it be delayed by COVID-19, or has COVID-19 actually pushed us to accelerate so that as we pivot and rethink what we've been doing, we can do it better and actually meet this target and even surpass it? When we think about women in science and women in the workplace and equity for women in STEM was not there before COVID. And COVID-19 has certainly come to make it worse. So what would it look like? What would this mean or look like for a woman in science? The disparities between men and women have resulted in women often bearing the burden of development needs and as a result, gaining fewer benefits from the development interventions themselves. Yet, we know that improving access to health and education for girls, will contribute to better child, maternal, family health outcome, such as reduced domestic violence, as well as improved nutrition. Under 5 rate mortalities will get better, resulting in increased productivity and incomes. We also know that in every sector, including women in science, promoting gender equality is necessary for achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and addressing these challenges. Gender, women in STEM is an integral and fully integrated into the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Goal number 5, that calls for achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls, and so that they can fully contribute in every single sector. Gender mainstreaming and integration, as used to address social and cultural norms related to gender equality, equity, and empowerment that are encountered as part of social and behavioral change approaches and interventions, have come a long way. These strategies can ensure that gender perspectives of both men and women are considered in a balanced way and integrated into all organizational activities, such as policy, advocacy, resource allocation, planning, implementation, monitoring of programs and projects, with the goal of impacting everybody, and so women can be full contributors. And I'll pause here a little bit to just say, irrespective of the sector, and we're talking about women in science, it is so important that the girl child, to be able to meet that pipeline, that this encouragement starts from a very early age to the point where we get women who can become researchers and leaders in science. The following 3 themes can help us better understand the current knowledge and practices that are surrounding gender mainstreaming and integration, especially for women and girls in science, and bring us closer to understanding some of the social and cultural norms and processes that can promote gender equality and strengthen how we actually go from talking to concretely taking action. Number 1, we really do need meaningful engagement of men and women. For women in science to be able to become a success story, it is extremely important that boys and men are engaged. The issue of social expectations and gender stereotyping have a direct effect on the well-being of both men and women. And in many cases, the behavioral and societal norms dictate what they should and should not do. For example, many people and many cultures, especially in sub-Saharan Africa where I come from, believe that access to resources and ability to make decisions around health issues and so lies with the men and not necessarily with the women. Conversely, the cultural belief that it is not masculine to go seek health care results in men also being overexposed and sometimes being in unnecessary pain and discomfort. Empowering women does not mean promoting women's power over men, nor does it imply losses for men. Rather, men must be involved as allies, such that whatever women choose to do, and from a young girl all the way to an adult woman who wants to do science, it is possible that they get the support of men, and this comes in terms of the attitudes of the men, the beliefs, and the behaviors. What needs to be done? Evidence shows that when we include men in how we think about the norms and how children and young women and later on adult women are treated in society, it becomes extremely important. Engagement of men and boys is a necessary element for any kind of gender transformative approach to be sustained. And I just want to end this first piece here about engaging men. That it is so important for women, girls in science and STEM to be able to see role models. So over the next 5 to 10 years, how do we ensure that women are given the space to actually serve as role models, be there so that other women, boys and girls can see that women can do? There are lots of women who've been able to do big things in science. But although such an attitude isn't universal, the example of South Korea for us stands up really well. The gap between is only 7 percentage points. This shows that a shift is possible and it's already underway in some countries. Parental influence is another big factor. that comes in. Many parents very likely expect their sons to work in STEM, and their daughters, who may show the same ability, are not encouraged as much. We've seen a little bit of a shift, from reports that have come out of Chile, Hungary, Portugal, that there 50% of the parents expected their sons to work in STEM, while only 20% had the same expectations of their daughters. Whilst parents and schools play a role, there is a perception issue to be remedied in the industry. So, for example, when we think about science and the things that have happened that have changed our world and our lives today, we think about, Bill Gates, you think about Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. So it is time that women get into these easily recognizable technical innovations that allows other women, other boys and girls to see that women can actually work in this space. The second thing I want to talk about, what needs to happen within the next 5 to 10 years that we'll be defining, is improving economic growth. The issue, gender inequalities, are costly to the economy and development of countries. These inequalities undermine productivity, trade performance, and women's capacity to contribute to the global economy. Many women are still discriminated against and exploited, and as a result are underpaid, insecure, and poverty-stricken. Less education and business training among female entrepreneurs also reduces their productivity. For example, in most developing countries, women play a major role in agricultural production. However, they have limited or no access to important assets such as land, labor, technology, credit, capital. Their wages represent only about 70% of men's wages. So what needs to be done? And we can do that again over the next 5 to 10 years. And women in science and STEM play a huge role. We don't want to be the only ones who are doing the hard work, the labor-intensive part. If we bring in technology, there's no reason why women should not be the agricultural researchers, bringing out the new technologies and ideas so that they can improve what they saw their grandmothers and mothers do in terms of labor at the farm. So what needs to be done? Promoting and shifting the norms to accept workplace equality among men and women so women can ensure economic empowerment. Women's empowerment through increased job opportunities can boost a country's economy. And we know for sure about this because the UN Women suggests partnering with programs that enable women to secure decent jobs, access resources, and influence public policies that mainly target women with a rural background and low skill sets is something that we know is going to move the needle forward. So again, when we think about women and girls in science, the range of places where they can intervene are as wide as from the tech sector in the tech industry to agriculture to our own food security. An example of a successful model, and I quote this from USAID, is USAID's approach in integrating gender issues into the agricultural value chains. For example, the Rwandan government used this approach to facilitate women's business registration by offering hours that accommodate women's schedule, hiring women staff, and providing women to help cash-constrained women register their businesses. So you've got to take a full holistic look at the entire ecosystem and figure out where are all the constraints for women and then see those are the things we need to address. And so where do our women and girls in science fit in? If we can build that pipeline and block all the places on the pipeline where the leaks occur, then we are sure that women will not only be the hard producers or maybe end consumers, but they're actually active participants, bringing their science to bear in a way that society and community can see. The third and last piece in terms of what we need to do to address how women in science and women in STEM can be actual active participants in the next 5 to 10 years is the issues around health inequality and gender. For you to be able to work, be empowered, you have to be healthy. So you need to be educated, you need to eat, but you need to be healthy. And here, what is the issue? In several areas of health, reproductive health, HIV/AIDS, communicable diseases, COVID that we're dealing with now, family planning and childcare, they all require great attention to gender integration, mainstreaming to ensure adequate preventive care and treatment for men and women. Acute and chronic health conditions among both genders can be reduced largely through addressing health inequalities caused by these social and cultural norms. Among women, low socioeconomic status, limited mobility, lack of decision making power, gender based violence, and early marriage all contribute to increase the risk of maternal mortality. So, what needs to be done? And I say this because if we don't address the issue of gender and health, we'll never be able to build that strong pipeline of young girls who are going to love to do biology, chemistry, maths, physics, music, that will end up becoming our researchers and our leaders, in science in the future. Here, gender mainstreaming in healthcare should include recognition of the different risk factors for both genders. A collection of gender specific data should be done so that it can inform policy. A sound healthcare financing system, recognition and development of processes to address the socioeconomic and cultural factors causing health disparities, and guaranteeing provision of health quality healthcare services and essential medicines for both genders. So, what next? These three themes for me are really critical as we look at the girls and women in science 5, 10 years from now. These themes are in no way exhaustive, but there's still much work to be done to understand how to apply this and best practices for integrating gender in a social behavioral change manner. And bringing this together will certainly increase the number of girls and women in STEM. So we are not only looking at the number of women and girls who get into STEM, we want them to stay in STEM and grow in STEM, become sciecepreneurs. And we should create the situation for women to be able to do so. So if I come back to myself, started my story, right? I started in medicine. Today I'm in management. And what has happened to me? So at the time I graduated from medical school in my early 20s, I, societal norm and my own decision, I got married, had children, before I was 30. And so the expectations of how you take care of children, how you take care of a family, and all of that, I did not have the opportunity to go into specialization. At the time, I would have loved to go into specialization. And there were several reasons for that. There were no specialization programs that allowed me to go with my husband and my children. Now, things have changed. Those kinds of opportunities are being offered. So we want to make sure that the time at which, young women, once we have looked at that pipeline, that teachers from elementary school, secondary school, and so where these transitions begin to break, that they are encouraging to both boys and girls, that we have gender responsive education happening at a very earlier part of the pipeline. That is extremely important. The middle part of the pipeline, which is where we're talking about the transition from secondary school and high school back into university. So if that pipeline is built, we should have that. So once you get into university and different societal norms and expectations for boys are different from girls, how do we make sure that the courses, the programs allow for, if a woman decides that they want to take off a year and go have a family or start something, that they can come back. So those are policy issues that need to be looked at. Hopefully, in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have many, many, many more role models. Role modeling is so important. Role modeling is important for the first phase, which is your primary all the way to secondary and high school. Role modeling is extremely important at the university level to just ensure that the young girls, boys and girls, they can actually see female professors, female researchers who are working with them and thinking with them with having equal opportunity. And then once the young girl or the young woman has graduated from university, either first degree, master's, PhD, whatever pathway they choose to take, and so on. If they choose to stay in academia and do research, let us ensure that the policies, the financing of those are being done with a gendered lens. If they choose to go into business or entrepreneurship, whether it is as a sciecepreneur or an entrepreneur in any other area, some science and scientists have gone ahead to open science specialized education centers. So whichever means you choose to take to move along your career, what is important is that there is a policy, there's an employable environment, there is access, and that at the end of the day, from the 1-year-old girl to the 50-year-old science reflector mother scientist, that we have what we call agency, that we feel that society is there to enable us so that we can be anything we want to be. So I'm going to stop here for now and pass it over back to you, Elizabeth, and hope that, if there are any questions, but my dream, my hope is that COVID or no COVID, what it has done is the things we're planning to do that we're going to take 10 years, let's now accelerate them. Let's now actually fast track them so that these things can actually create an enabling environment for both boys and girls, men and women to thrive as we get into Agenda 2030. Thank you.